Hello, let's talk about the absence of the major powers on the League of Nations. That will be the key topic for revision today. Yes, you know pretty well that President Wilson established this organization with headquarters in Geneva after the catastrophic events of World War One, and trying to prevent, to avoid any other possible repetition of this catastrophe. The origins of the League, even though was already proposed in 19th century and before the First World War by Robert Cecil of Great Britain, John Smuts of South Africa, and even the French Léon Bourgeois. But the recognition really of this, the need of this league, was not achieved until President Wilson of the United States proposed it in his famous 14 points speech. The influence and power of President Wilson brought the league into real existence, and he dedicated himself to the creation of it and make it his priority. So the ideas of the league, remember that it was idealistically seems to be perfect solution to all the existing problems of peace. But in reality, we have a lot to talk about. The principles were of collective security and negotiation, as well as promoting democracy in the world and widespread disarmament. Why was it unsuccessful? Such a good idea. Well, it was a lot of inability to exercise the control over the nations that included the failure to delegate the necessary power to defend the principles. Another key point was the inability of the league itself to declare racial equality. You know that the principle, for example, of self-determination was applied to Europe and the creations of new countries such as Czechoslovakia or the reborn of Poland or the creation of Yugoslavia, but was not allowed to the Middle East when the Ottoman Empire collapsed. There they decided that all those territories were given as mandates to England and France. So the biggest failing of the League of Nations proved to be the absence of several major world powers, like Germany until 1926, the Soviet Union, and ironically, the United States. So, So a League of Victors was called, yes. All of the defeated powers, including Germany, were not invited to become members of the League and declared as criminal or outlaws states. The defeated powers, like Germany itself, truly had no interest at the beginning in joining the League because they disagree with its principles and the Paris settlements that brought it into existence. Remember that they were called the November criminals. So the main effect of this was Germany would prove to be a future aggressor because of their harsh treatment in this peace settlement. And they were going to be excluded until Ebert, during the Weimar Republic in 1926, will decided to join. So the League had no way of promoting the policy of collective security if Germany was not a member. The League became a simple guardian of the status quo rather than an impartial arbitrator of disputes. Germany did not have a chance to attempt to renegotiate settlements of the grievance created by the treaty. This created a downward spiral of relations between Germany and other nations that would eventually lead to World War II. These are called all the different international treaties that we are going to study later. Let's talk about the Soviet Union exclusion because they were communist and Wilson did not allow them to enter the League. Why? Because the League would become the League of Democracy, and Wilson did not want to allow nor tolerate a communist in this league. So the Soviet Union had suffered major territorial losses due to the Treaty of Versailles and did not really want to associate itself with the League because they would be accepting the status quo established by the treaty itself. So, the effect of this is that it heightened Russian animosity towards the whole Western Europe. And it planted the thought that the Western nations were conspiring to destroy them in Russia's mind. Russia wanted to recover its strength and eventually reclaim the territory it had lost, creating future problems for the League coming ahead. Let's talk about the main um, lack of participation that was the United States of America's rejection on the League. Yes, and the treaty. President Wilson was the biggest advocate for it. It was his impetus to form it that it brought to the League together. But his absence caused a sharp decline in its prestige. Many countries, saying that its own creator had rejected it, became even more worried to enter the League of Nations. It undermined the League's credibility and gave support to the state who did not want to pledge themselves to the League of Nations, even though they wanted peace. So, what were the effects of it? Taking into consideration that the United States was considered the most powerful and wealthy nation after World War One, Wilson believed that if the United States were to enter the League, it would allow them to become a world leader in the creation of a more peaceful, progressing system of international relations. Well, but the Americans do not totally agree with his presidents. The American had complicated attitudes towards Europeans, a mixture of admiration for their past accomplishments, a conviction that the Allies would have been lost without the US, and a suspicion that if the Americans were not careful enough, the wild Europeans would pull them into the trolls again. And they were really true. So it came the end of the debate about isolation or involvement. The end result of this conflict was reinstatement of the policy of isolationism. United States was ever wary of being involved in Europe again, led to the US Congress rejection of both the treaty and the League Covenant. Remember that the Covenant were the rules, and the US government could not reach an agreement on the treaty. So they would have needed two-thirds of majority. There were lots of problems between the Democrats and the Republicans. Remember that Wilson was a Democrat himself. So finally rejected. Yes. So what were the consequences? The League became the guardian of the status quo. Collective security was ineffective, especially in the 30s. We are going to analyze case by case how small disputes in the 20s were working quite well, but not in the 30s. Did not enforce the Treaty of Versailles because Germany and Russia were excluded, caused heightened tensions between Eastern and Western Europe, and led to treaties outside the League of Nations, like the Treaty of Rapallo in 1922. USA rejection of the League diminished its prestige. The remaining countries had to enforce treaty without the aid of powerful America. Great Britain began to resort to isolationism itself, cancel Anglo-American guarantee to support France, and many nations drop out of the League between this period, especially after the 35 with the last crisis of Abyssinia and Mussolini experiment. Thank you.